Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about a topic that shakes the heart of anyone who stops to think about it. Why does the world seem to ignore the suffering of civilians in Gaza? This is not just a political question. It is a question about humanity, justice, and the value we place on innocent life. When we see images of destroyed homes, injured children, and desperate families, it is natural to ask why the response from the international community feels muted, hesitant, or even indifferent. When we look at Gaza, we see a place where millions of people live in one of the most densely populated areas in the world. They are trapped by borders, surrounded by checkpoints, and limited in their freedom of movement. The majority of the population is very young, and many have never left the territory. This isolation makes every crisis worse because there are few options for safety and even fewer opportunities for a normal life. One reason the world seems to ignore Gaza is that the conflict has lasted for decades. People get used to seeing the same headlines over and over again. When a tragedy is not new, it no longer shocks the global audience in the same way. This is what some call compassion fatigue. People who do not live in Gaza might feel powerless to change anything, so they look away. Over time, this lack of attention turns into silence. Media coverage also plays a huge role. Not all stories are given equal space in international media. Some outlets frame the events in Gaza as part of a political or military struggle, focusing on rockets, airstrikes, and ceasefires instead of the human cost. When the focus is on statistics and military actions, it is easy for the world to forget that behind every number is a family, a child, a mother grieving the loss of someone she loves. Another factor is geopolitics. Powerful countries have interests in the region, alliances they want to maintain, and economic or security goals that influence how they respond. Sometimes leaders prefer to stay neutral or avoid angering allies, even if that means speaking less about civilian suffering. This political caution can look like indifference to those watching from the outside. Social media has made it easier for people to share stories directly from Gaza, but even then, algorithms decide what we see and what we do not. Content about civilian suffering might not trend as much as entertainment or sports, and when it does trend, it often faces debates, misinformation, and arguments that distract from the human tragedy at the center of it all. Another reason is the dehumanization that happens during long conflicts. When people are constantly shown as victims in war zones, others start to see them as statistics instead of individuals. The constant cycle of violence creates a mental distance between the viewer and the victim. People start to feel that tragedy is normal for that place, which is a very dangerous way of thinking. Some argue that double standards exist in how the world responds to crises. When violence breaks out in certain parts of the world, we see rapid responses, sanctions, humanitarian aid, and strong words from global leaders. When similar or worse things happen in Gaza, the response is slower, weaker, or limited to statements of concern. This inequality can make the people of Gaza feel abandoned and forgotten. Humanitarian organizations do try to help, but they face major obstacles. Delivering food, water, medicine, and shelter in a place under blockade is very difficult. Aid convoys sometimes cannot get through, and when they do, the supplies are never enough. This means that even when the world does care, its ability to act is restricted by the realities on the ground. There is also fear of speaking out. In many countries, the topic of Gaza is politically sensitive. People worry about being accused of bias, taking sides, or offending powerful groups. As a result, some prefer to stay silent or use very neutral language, which does not capture the urgency of the situation. All of these factors combine to create a global silence that hurts the people of Gaza twice. First, they suffer from war, poverty, and trauma. Second, they suffer from being ignored by the world that could raise its voice louder on their behalf. This silence sends a message that their pain is less important, that their lives are somehow less valuable. But silence can be broken. Ordinary people around the world can choose to learn, to care, and to speak. They can share the stories of civilians, demand more balanced coverage from media, and pressure their governments to act for peace and protection of human life. The more we talk about Gaza, the harder it becomes for the world to look away. It is also important to focus on hope, not just despair. Despite everything, people in Gaza continue to live, to marry, to have children, to go to school, and to dream about a better future. Their resilience is a form of resistance against being forgotten. By supporting them, even with words, we remind them that they are not alone. Education is a key part of changing how the world sees Gaza. When people understand the history, the causes of the conflict, and the daily reality of civilians, they are less likely to fall for propaganda or one-sided narratives. This is why documentaries, books, and personal testimonies are so important. Social media campaigns have shown that global attention can make a difference. When enough people speak up, governments and international bodies feel pressure to act. This has happened before with other humanitarian crises, and it can happen again for Gaza. The world must also reject the idea that violence in Gaza is inevitable. There are solutions, but they require courage and political will. Ceasefires, humanitarian corridors, negotiations, and long-term peace plans are not impossible. They are difficult, yes, but not beyond human ability. We also have to talk about trauma. Generations in Gaza are growing up with memories of war, fear, and loss. This has a long-term impact on mental health and social stability. Ignoring Gaza means ignoring the future of these children who deserve to live in peace and dignity. The economic situation is another layer of the crisis. High unemployment, destroyed infrastructure, and limited access to markets make it hard for families to survive. When the world ignores Gaza, investment and rebuilding do not happen, and the cycle of poverty continues. By speaking about Gaza, we remind ourselves that human rights are universal. They are not privileges given to some and denied to others. The right to safety, shelter, food, and freedom belongs to everyone, including the people of Gaza. Even small actions matter. Sharing credible news, donating to humanitarian groups, writing to elected officials, and participating in peaceful demonstrations all add up. Change often starts with awareness, and awareness grows when people refuse to stay silent. When we look back at history, we see that silence during times of suffering has always been judged harshly. Future generations will ask what we did when civilians were suffering. They will ask if we spoke up or stayed quiet. This is why breaking the silence is so important right now. At the heart of this discussion is empathy. We do not need to live in Gaza to feel their pain. We just need to see them as human beings like us, with the same dreams, fears, and hopes. Empathy is the first step toward justice. The world may seem to ignore Gaza today, but that does not have to be the final word. Every voice counts, every share matters, and every act of solidarity brings us closer to a world where no civilian is ignored, no matter where they live. Thank you for staying with me through this difficult but necessary discussion. If this moved you, share it with someone else. Start a conversation and help keep the focus where it belongs, on the civilians who deserve peace, safety, and dignity just like anyone else.